Hello all, and welcome to this week's episode of Opera and Me. I'm your host, Robert Mellon. This week we've got an incredible show for you. I bring in Keith Phares to talk about his role of Count Almaviva in 2018's production of Le Nozze di Figaro. Now, Keith has quite the history with this role, as he's done it not only at Opera Maine, but he's done it at Opera Saratoga. He's also done it at New Orleans Opera, Colorado Opera, and Wolf Trap. He was also in the world premiere of Jake Heggie's 3 Decembers, which he performed both at Houston Grand Opera and San Francisco Opera. Keith has also been on the stages of the Metropolitan Opera, the New York City Opera, Seattle Opera, the Santa Fe Opera, and Glimmerglass. So I hope you stick around to hear what Keith has to say on one of the most iconic roles in opera, Count Almaviva in Le Nozze di Figaro. Let's go to the interview. All right, I'm sitting here with Keith Phares. You'll remember Keith from the 2018 production of Le Nozze di Figaro, where Keith knocked it out of the park as the Count. I played Figaro to his Count, and to this day, it is still one of my favorite interpretations of the Count. And that's what I want to talk to Keith about today. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Keith, you've done the Count before. How many times before you showed up to Opera Maine had you done the Count?
I think maybe five or six times.
And the first time you did the Count, how old were you?
I was 26.
Now, 26 versus having now done it in 2018, how different was the Count for you at 26 versus the Count 2 years ago?
So the first time I did it was 2001, and I was at Wolf Trap, and I didn't know anything. And so I think I was just orally, I was doing my best Thomas Allen impression. And I was trying to walk around with some kind of gravitas.
Yeah.
And I remember being in graduate school, and this is no knock against the grad school I went to or anything. It's just that when you get with a group of other aspiring singers, an opera like Nozze di Figaro comes up, or a role like the Count, and all of the amateur musicologists start coming out of the woodwork, and they're like, oh no, he would never do that. So there was a lot of that. Oh, he would never do that, like that kind of stuff. I have a funny story, actually. The first staging class that I sang in at grad school, I sang the Count's aria, and I had learned it in college. My voice teacher gave it to me, and I learned it, and but I never really translated. I think the opera director was John Moriarty. I was at NEC, who's forgotten more than I'll ever know. He knows everything. Brilliant musician, mentor, and knows so much stuff. I think he knew how green I was. He knew how green I was, and so I was the first one up. He goes, Phares, Count's aria. And so I got up there like, oh, okay, and then I sang it, and I forget what line it was, but he said, what are you saying here? What's this line here? And I said, oh, I don't speak Italian. And the whole class just like burst out laughing like you did just then, except it was like 30 people.
Right.
So when I was at the first time I ever did it, when I was at Wolf Trap, I wasn't supposed to do it originally. The guy that was supposed to do it couldn't because his wife was having a baby. So yeah, I mean, I had learned it, but I didn't really understand recit. I was still learning. I didn't know anything. So I can't say I really have much of a character.
So you had mentioned too that you're doing it for the first couple times. All of these musicologists, or self-proclaimed musicologists are coming out of the woodwork, and you're having to hear people say, he would do this, he wouldn't do this, Mozart would have wanted this, Mozart never would have wanted this. How do you handle getting all this information?
Yeah, I did it a few more times after that. I did it once where Thomas Allen was directing.
Oh God! So you're actually in the room Now, Thomas Allen, for all of you who don't know, really set the bar for Mozart baritones during his career. So here's Keith in the room doing a role that Thomas Allen perfected.
It was funny. There was a, I think we were staging the Act 2 recit between the Count and Countess. And there was a walk across the stage that we had to take. And I was still like, I don't know how I'm supposed to be. And he's like, just walk. You need to walk, like, just walk across the stage. But like, that's Thomas Allen, and he like, I was double cast with Dan, Dan Teeth. We were double cast together, and we would laugh about this. And Dan would go, yeah, Keith, walk with, like with gravitas. Like you're Sir Thomas Allen. Like, you can't do it. You can't. What I'm getting at is that I finally had to be comfortable trying to do it, like basically trying to be myself within the context of the role. I mean,
so just to piggyback on that statement there, are you somebody, when you step into a role, the role is you as this person, not necessarily you finding someone new to be that person?
Well, I am not trying to make every role me in a different costume. Is that what you're...
I recently just did a role in a show where I was an abusive husband, basically, okay? And now I myself am not an abusive person, but I thought, okay, if I were, what would be me as that person? So that my mannerisms and my physicality on stage were still natural because they were true to me, but the way I used them and the actions that followed them created this monster out of myself.
I have to watch it because I have some funny physical mannerisms that I know that are not going to be appropriate.
Gotcha. Yeah.
They're just going to be distracting. I watch my posture when I'm playing the Count.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to overdo it. It's been a while. This has been the case for the past 10, 15 years now, is that I do try to be a person on stage. I try to be a relatable person. Yeah. As far as the Count is concerned, I had to not focus so much on the physicality or on thinking about how important I'm supposed to be. A lot of people tell you, oh yeah, well, you wouldn't touch that person. And yeah, there are issues like that where you wouldn't necessarily touch it. You get so bogged down in like how it looks that you're forgetting about what you want in the scene and who you are in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so one big thing with Count was just finally getting to the place where I'm just trying to get what I want. That he's not looking at himself as a bad guy, he's looking at himself as a very reasonable guy.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to get what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you act when you're not getting what you want?
You happen to show that really well in the production in the summer of 2018 at Opera Maine. And I wanted to comment on the fact that your Count that summer was one of those counts where folks spoke about it afterwards in saying they didn't see you as the monster that often he is looked at as for the acts that he's committing, whether it's cheating on his wife or fooling around with Barbarina, or going after Susanna countless times behind his friend Figaro's back. There's so many levels of him that could be viewed as disgusting, but you approached it in this way that made you almost likable despite all of that. Can you talk about how that kind of formed? And is that something that you take into the Count every time? So
like when I did it at Saratoga or when I did it at Maine, I was just trying not to broadcast the rest of the story ahead of time.
Yeah.
Any sense? And just stay in the scene. It's like I'm thinking of that scene when he perché chiuso.
Yeah.
When he's coming in to confront the Countess. Having lived a little more life, it occurred to me that there'd be some more familiarity, and that he is going to be prudent and just try to figure out what's going on first before he starts trying to be threatening. And I feel like it just works better if you don't give that away.
How difficult is it for you to show up to a role again at a different company with a different production team and not have any preconceived notions, to keep an open mind, to try to follow what's being given to you both musically and directorially?
It's actually pretty easy. I think that's how I am by nature. I'm willing to I feel like I'm teachable. I'm willing to take other people's input. I mean, I think that's almost to a fault. And that was especially early on in my career, it was definitely to a fault. I was sort of waiting to be told what to do. And then I learned finally that, like, I was expected to come with my own ideas, but that, that can be a little bit of a dance depending on who you're working with, how to communicate what your ideas are without offending anybody. So yeah, I mean, there are a handful of roles that I've done multiple times, and each time it's been different. It's because it sort of happens in the process. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, sure. What's up?
This goes back to the question about coming into a new production. There's a really great example of that from Opera Maine, working with Donna. Donna had called me out on something that I hadn't been called out on in years. I'm not even sure the correct terminology for this. And if she sees this, she's probably going to burst out laughing.
Wait, is it that thing like which foot you lead on stage?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's always the upstage foot if you're depending on which direction. So if you're going the stage right, your right foot leads. If you're going to stage left, your left foot leads.
And like, thank God I had enough of that. I knew basically what that was, but I could do it when she asked me to. I always feel like such a fool on stage. Like, I don't know how to move on stage and I knew I was doing that correctly, and she said, "Good job." That I felt like such a great.
You felt validated.
I know how to do this now on stage. Myself, I'm going to lead with my right foot. But I felt like I'm amazing.
That's a big deal for her. Stagecraft is a huge deal for her. And the sad thing is that everywhere else I've worked outside of Opera Maine, no one ever talks about it. Maybe you've run into it more over your career, but in my little career that I've had over the past 6 years, I have not run into too many other directors that were even interested in talking stagecraft. Have you gotten to a point with a role like this, The Count, or other roles that you've done multiple times, that you're happy with the character, or are you still searching for that perfect finish, for that kind of sanding off whatever rough edges there are left?
Oh, well, I mean, I have a baseline of I know I can always do better. But with The Count, I feel like I can finally go into that with confidence, because that was the issue before, especially before I got to the Saratoga production and Maine. I just didn't feel like it was me. But yeah, The Count, I feel pretty good about that now. But it'll never be perfect.
Keith, I want to thank you very much for joining me today for this interview. I know everybody in Maine loved the work that you did in The Marriage of Figaro a couple of years ago. It was a memorable count. I know myself on stage, I had a blast working with you. You're a
Likewise.
delight. And that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Opera in Me featuring Keith Phares. Next week, we bring in Adam Deagle, who not only has sung 3 major roles with Opera Maine, but has also had quite a career of his own. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Opera Maine, or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Opera Maine. To finish this week's episode, I thought it only right to give you a taste of the wonderful performance that Keith Phares gave us in 2018. Here is the latter half of his aria Hai già vinta la causa, seen in the 3rd act of Le Nozze di Figaro.
Spero